On behalf of the A Center Pre-Health Professions Advising Program and the wonderful pre-health ambassadors that are here, I'd like to welcome everyone to the 2021 Virtual Health Professions Expo. If this is your first panel, if you've gone to multiple panels today, welcome back. Panelists, thank you so much for being with us here today and sharing your time with us. And those of you attending, thanks for being here. This is going to be a panel about gap year of opportunity, and it is sponsored by Faces in Health Professions Club. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sarah and Bella, our ambassadors, who will moderate the panel.
Hi, everybody. My name is Belle Redpath, and I am one of the pre-health ambassadors. Now, before we begin this panel and we have each of the panelists introduce themselves, I will start off by reading the University of Arizona land acknowledgement. And that reads, the University of Arizona sits on the original homelands of Indigenous peoples who have stewarded this land since time immemorial. Aligning with the university's core value of a diverse and inclusive community, it is an institutional responsibility to recognize and acknowledge the people, culture, and history that make up the Wildcat community. At the institutional level, it is important to be proactive in broadening awareness throughout campus to ensure our students feel represented and valued. So that was the land acknowledgement. And now with that, we would like to have each of the panelists introduce themselves. So doesn't matter who starts, anyone who wants to jump in there.
I can get us started off today. Hi there, my name is Cassandra Everly, and I'm a first-year medical student at the University of Arizona College of Medicine, Phoenix. I went to U of A for my undergrad. I graduated in 2017. My major was physiology. Loved physio, and it's very helpful when you get into med school to know that stuff. I took 3 gap years actually, not necessarily intentionally, but that's how my path ended up. So my first, right after out of undergrad, I took a gap year and I worked in physical therapy to get some experience working with patients, even though I knew I wanted to go into medicine. Applied to medical school, didn't get in. Applied again, didn't get in, and I switched jobs and began working at the university as a research coordinator. And that was the best job ever. I was honestly very sad to leave that job to go start medical school, but I can talk more about that later if anyone has any questions about that. But eventually round 3 came and I got accepted, and here I am.
Good afternoon, my name is Eric Leemster. I'm a 4th year medical student at Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine. I graduated from University of Arizona in 2015 with physiology as one of my main, with biochemistry, and then molecular and cellular biology with mathematics. I had 2 gap years, also not intentional, but everything kind of works out pretty well eventually, and I'll be starting my family medicine residency at Eglin Air Force Base this summer. During my gap years, right after college, I got my EMT license, did an accelerated program the first 2 months, quickly found out that that's a saturated profession and it was tough getting a job, so I couldn't be an EMT anywhere local. So I actually worked in physical therapy as well, which I thought was probably the best stepping stone, especially helping me get into DO school. I still use those physical therapy techniques and exercises I learned with like every patient every day currently. And then also I did that for about a year. And then the year leading up to when I got into medical school, I was a scribe in a family practice. And that I highly recommend as well. You really learn the language of medicine as well, like anatomy and physiology definitely teach you the words, but seeing what doctors do every day and learning the language and reading reports and labs is extremely helpful as well going into medical school.
Eric, can you also share a little bit about your health profession military scholarship?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. So I applied, it's called the Hpsp Health Profession Scholarship Program. I'm in the Air Force, so each branch has so many each year that they give out. You apply concurrently when you apply to medical schools, and when you get into medical school, you can then approach the military and say, I have this contract. Essentially, there's a deal that you strike with them, and they have a lot of benefits. So you are in the military and you will owe them time. But they pay for medical school, and for every year that they pay for medical school, you owe them a year after residency. But it's really beneficial in terms of they pay for your schooling, they pay for your insurance during the 4 years of schooling, to give you a living stipend every month while you're in school. So that's 4 years of living expenses that's paid for as well. They reimburse for books, which is $4,000 roughly, a laptop, boards, which is a good few $1,000s, stethoscope, white coat, expenses like that every year. Military discount on everything. But overall, you don't have to deal with insurances once you graduate, which is very beneficial. That's what I come to learn when I was doing my medical scribing, how difficult dealing with insurances is. And also you deal with a great clientele. So you're dealing with soldiers every day and their families. So overall, they're usually healthier people. They want to be healthy. And so you have a great relationship with them. They want to listen to you and do what you say. Also, they see their doctors a lot more because they have the TRICARE health insurance. So they see the doctors more, so small issues don't turn into big issues. So it's a great clientele, and highly recommend reaching out, learning more about the Hpsp program if it's at all interesting.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jasmine Curry. I am a current second-year medical student at Oregon Health and Science University. I graduated May 2018 from U of A with my degree in physiology, and I did take an intentional one-year gap year where after I graduated, I took my MCAT, and then I had gone into a research program at the Minneapolis Heart Institute Foundation in Minnesota. So I went over there for the summer, and during that time, I learned about a program at OHSU. It's a 10-month postbac program aimed at American Indian and Alaska Native students. So I applied, I got in. It was kind of like an early decision program because we do get conditional acceptance. So I went ahead and did that and matriculated August 2019. And then I can talk about that more later, all the perks in the program.
All right, thank you guys for those introductions. So I know you already talked about it a little bit, but for our first question, what are some other things you recommend students do during their gap year, such as clinical experience or research or anything like that?
I can start us off again. I think for me, my clinical experience was the thing I didn't have a lot of time to do during undergrad. And so when I graduated, that was the one thing that I really wanted to get a lot of hours in and get a lot of experience in. So I did that through physical therapy. I worked as a tech, and that was really beneficial because you're working directly with patients constantly day and night. When I moved over and worked at the university, I worked in research there, and I thought that was pretty helpful because I didn't think I liked research. I didn't think that was something I wanted to do. And once I started working there, I found out that it was really cool and that you get to do a lot of really interesting things. So I would say maybe if there's something that you feel your application is a little weak on, then your gap year is a great time to build that up, and then just try things that you've not tried. Maybe other people are in the same boat where they're like, I don't want to do research, but I feel like I have to, but just give it a try. I'd say go with an open mind and see what comes up for you.
I'll jump in next again. So I highly recommend, if you didn't have anatomy and physiology in undergrad, really just trying to learn as much nomenclature and anatomy words as you can. One of my best friends in medical school for second year was like pre-law. So he had just enough prerequisites to get in, but it didn't include anatomy and physiology. And he had to study an extra 2, 3, 4 hours every day to really get in the anatomic words that were kind of almost second nature to me. And there's already enough that we don't know as medical students going in. So having at least some of that background is extremely helpful. As a physical therapy technician as well, it's really great to learn to talk to patients daily, so you don't have that fear of a lot of medical students do, especially when you start dealing with kind of like your Hpsp and learning to take histories, and they set you up with actors that act as patients. Most medical schools do that, and a lot of the times it's really tough getting going for certain students because they haven't had that kind of real world make it flow naturally, talk to the person. They're just people, they're not scary. So definitely highly recommend trying to talk to, getting some of that clinical experience as well, if you can.
I definitely agree with what both of them have said. It's a great time to improve in any of your weaknesses. I was really lucky that both programs that I did, they had a focus in research, because I did have a little bit of experience, but I definitely wanted more. And then both also had clinical shadowing. And then also during my gap year, I volunteered with an ophthalmology clinic. So that was, and I was given more responsibility. So that was a great time for me to work on my people skills and really interact. And also a great time for me to serve tribal communities up here in the Pacific Northwest.
I have a specific question. So in regards to the unintentional gap years, what kept your guys' spirits high? Like what kept you guys wanting to pursue medicine further after your initial declines with getting in? So I'm scared of that. So help, please.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It is really hard when you get rejected. So my first year, I got interviewed at 2 different places and I got rejected from both of them. And it felt really devastating at the time. But I think what kept me going is knowing that it was what I wanted to do and having that firm resolve and recognizing that it doesn't matter how I get there as long as I get there. So I know, especially as pre-meds and people who are very focused, we have our goals, we're type A, right? We have our whole lives planned out, and oftentimes things get thrown in there that we're not expecting, and just recognizing that, that might not be what you were hoping for. Definitely was not what I was hoping for. I thought right out 1 year applying, then I go for it, but it ended up being a really good thing. And so I think keeping perspective that it doesn't matter how long it takes. One good thing was, if I had to apply a 4th time, I would have had to retake my MCAT, and I was really not wanting to do that, but I had decided that if that happened, I would do it because I just knew that it was what I wanted to do. One other thing I would recommend is setting a plan B, in the sense that if you don't get in the particular year that you're applying, the next year is going to be okay. So getting a job that you can do for a whole nother year that you're going to feel satisfied in, or just having an experience taking a trip somewhere, doing something that if you don't get in, you're still not losing in this game, if that makes sense.
I 100% agree with all of that. In terms of people, to share some stats that I just quickly looked up before this, when you looked up acceptance rate for medical school, it was 41% of people that applied, and that was in 2018. So it's gotten worse since then because more people applied. So more likely than not, you will have to take a gap year. If you wanted to take time off and travel afterwards, I still highly recommend at least applying to your top few programs, even interviewing. And then, if you find out early, that's great. I found out in December and still didn't start till August. So that leaves 6 months of still traveling. I had a good time, weight off the shoulders at that point. But the first few times definitely don't go that way. Getting experience as a scribe, as a PT technician, all those things don't pay very well. So you're really digging into your savings and really just hoping that you eventually get in. Because taking the time off, traveling, things like that, it's tough justifying that, when you come back, you don't have a guaranteed plan still. You don't know if you're still going to get in. So digging into your savings more and more, it's just really tough. So I highly recommend always applying at least your first year, even if you don't want to take a year. Because if you don't get in, I know a lot of professors told me afterwards that they see the names of everybody who applies the first year. And if you get an interview and still don't get accepted, the second year when they see the names again, you have a higher chance because they know you're really committed. They know you want to do it. So you're more likely, the more times you apply, to get in as well, because like I said, they know you're committed. Obviously it is scary getting rejected. You get the denial letter and you're like, oh God, am I competitive? Do I know what I'm doing? You research the stats again and again to make sure you're like, okay, I kind of fall in line. But doing medicine every day, like as a scribe, I was seeing patients every day with the doctor, and that kind of helped build up this is what I want to do. This is great. We helped people today. I saw these really interesting things. He let me assist in some small like dermatological procedures. Like, this is what I want to do. So getting into what you want to do helps keep you going in it. But having a plan B as well is extremely important. I had applied to be an aerospace physiologist with the Air Force anyway. So that's kind of helping like train the pilots to not pass out and, you know, thinking of other jobs that interest you. So I was already in line for that when I happened to get into medical school, and then was able to get back on track. Because after a while, you're like, your prerequisites could expire. I know I have a friend who's applying to PA school, but that's happening to her right now. This is to her last year she's applying. Otherwise, she needs to retake classes, and she doesn't want to do that. So it is a struggle, and it is tough. But hang in there, and it usually pans out eventually.
All right, I have a question that came in through the chat. So this is actually directed at Jasmine. The student wants to know the name of the program that you did over the summer, I think. She said the American Indian program that you went into. It sounds like this particular student is interested in perhaps looking into it.
So it was the YE's Postbac Program, and I can drop a link in the chat, and then
Thank you.
Do you want me to give a quick recap?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so it's a 10-month program from September to June, and their application's actually going to open April 1st, and you go through the science, epidemiology, academic skills and wellness, indigenous health, research, MCAT prep, and clinical shadowing. And then it just really helps with the transition into medical school, which was their aim, and to increase the number of American Indian and Alaska Native physicians.
Thank you.
I have another question. So for a student who's considering taking a gap year, like an intentional gap year, what advice do you have on whether or not they should?
I definitely think timing, and if you feel ready or not. I didn't feel like I could take the MCAT and finish undergrad all at the same time. I felt like I needed that extra year, and also applying and traveling and having a job and all that. And then I just wanted more experience as well, more real world experience, because I feel like the university life is kind of like a bubble. You just go to class, maybe you have a job, but there's more out there. And also, it was going to be my first time moving away from home. So I really wanted that real life experience. And I think it did help me in the long run. And I feel like I can better connect with my patients now as well.
So I have another question. and this is more, I think Eric kind of touched on it a little already. But one thing that we always talk to students about, at least, you know, I do, especially and again, I'm forgetting the new terminology, but our non-traditional students, we talk about, you know, the prereqs, and a lot of them have degrees or have had other careers or things like that. And so they're like, okay, I think I want to do, you know, I want to be a dentist or a PA or medical school. And sometimes when we get into the conversation of cost, right, it can be eye-opening. And so I think for those of you who have, you know, unfortunately had to reapply maybe multiple times, how do you handle cost? How do you budget? I mean, even for first-time applicants, right? How do you budget and make sure that you have enough money for, you know, for the MCAT, for the application, for secondaries? In your case, you were pre-pandemic, so travel, clothing, hotel stay, food, you know, all these things add up. So if you all want to share, you know, how did you budget for this, especially if it's multiple years, and so maybe that advice could be, if you could give that some advice to our students who are, you know, thinking about it and maybe hadn't thought about that cost piece for when they're ready to apply.
It is always more expensive than you think. Every aspect of it, even applying. Yeah, there's secondaries. even right now, you're still dealing with it. Even right now, applying to residencies, you pay hundreds of dollars to fill out an application, then you have to pay another company hundreds of dollars to send that application. It's just a ridiculous amount of money for everything. So the same thing goes for applying to medical school. There's secondaries, as you were saying, where you, even if you you send out your primary application to everybody, they come back, say, okay, fill out these, essays. We want to know more about you. Usually a $50 to $150 cost you send back with it. So you're traveling, staying in a hotel, getting probably a new suit and or dry cleaning a lot. The costs really do add up. So that's why for me, like I said, I was working, but still living as cheaply as I could. I had to move back in with the parents the second year, and still digging into the savings more and more. So that's why really I was looking into my plan B. It was the last year I was probably applying, because then it's just, I don't have anything else to run on after this. So definitely recommend, seeing what you have to work with. Take the shortcuts where you can. Unfortunately, moving back in with your parents after you move out for college is very disheartening sometimes, and there's stigma, but it's sometimes just the best option you can do. So that's why I highly recommend, even if you want to take a gap year, still really recommend applying to at least your top program or two. 1 in a million chance to get NYU, but apply to it. Say you do get an interview, or at least you get familiar with the process. If you get in, well, there you go. It's your top program. But at least you get familiar with the process. You see roughly what it's like, timeline, what it's like, and at least also, even if you get an interview, from then on in future interviews, you can reflect on it. Like, here's maybe some mistakes that I made. You can self-reflect a little bit more. If you made any mistakes in the interview or said certain things, maybe you're overconfident about yourself, then you can use that to reflect on in future interviews. And then people pick up that you're more humble, or, you learned lessons throughout time. So that's my advice there.
I would very much echo what Eric said, that yes, it's quite expensive. And it is something that I hadn't really thought about beforehand. I did also live with my parents for the majority of the time that I was applying, and sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. So I would say, kind of looking ahead, try to figure out about how many schools you might be interested in applying to, and kind of get a range for how much. And then I would say, add 20% more, because it's always more expensive than you expect it would be, but really having that foresight, because it can come up and it can be shocking how much it costs. But I think too, if it's something that you really want to do, I would say don't be scared of the cost, because in the end it will pay off. As long as you can make it work right now, if it's something you really want to do, I would, and I don't know, I'm sure the pre-health advisors have more information on this, but there are fee assistance programs and stuff like that that are available too. So it is expensive though, and it's a good thing to keep in mind. Oh, and actually one more thing I wanted to echo. For students who are concerned about taking a gap year, I know for me, it felt like I was the only person taking a gap year. And I would say that 75+% of my class are not right out of undergrad. Majority of the class has at least had one or two. Two of my classmates have their PhDs, multiple classmates have their masters already. So you're not standing out in the crowd by taking a gap year. It's actually very much what people do right now. So just want to put that out there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that they said. If you can budget right now, save. That's what I had to do for my interview, is dip into my savings. And I also moved states twice in like 6 months. But also reach out to CDI. They do have waivers that they can help you with. Yes, I was gonna say something, but I forgot. If I remember, I'll put it in the chat.
So there's actually a question from the chat, and it says, I have a logistical question in the case where you would reapply to your choice schools. With reapplying and submitting letters of rec, do the people who wrote your letters before have to resubmit the letter they wrote for you your first round in the new cycle, or do the letters stay on record?
From my experience, yeah, you do have to resubmit the letters. And oftentimes that was letters of rec is a little tricky because when you get out of undergrad, right when you graduate, you have your letters from your professors, if you did research, volunteer work, and then those letters get old. They do. And so you have to ask the people to resubmit the letters that they have, but sometimes they're not as relevant to your situation now because you're a year out from that experience. So thinking too about when you're doing your job, maybe is there a boss that can write you a letter of rec for clinical experience and things like that. It's not something that they keep on file. It stays with you as you go. It's a whole new application when you start it. Good
And
question.
as a reapplicant, you really want to apply. A year makes a big difference in things that you've done. And so, you know, updating your letters, you want to make sure that they are dated. And also to keep in touch, as Cassie was saying, is that a lot of times you ask a faculty member or someone to write your letter, and then they don't hear from you for a year. It's really important. I can't emphasize this enough. Maintain those contacts, let them know what's going on with you. If you get an interview, because if you have to come back a year later, you don't want to just say, can you update that letter? I mean, that's really just not professional. So make sure that you maintain that contact. And if they were important enough for you to ask for a letter, they would be more than willing to update that letter for you. So you want current, accurate letters that reflect what happened in the past year.
And I think Jasmine shared something in the chat. I don't know if you want to read it, Jasmine, but that's actually really good information.
Yeah, so at my school, we have like a student run program where people sign up to house interviewees for like a couple of nights when they're coming in. And sometimes they offer to pick them up at the airport. So I believe other schools have similar programs. So it's great if you can get in contact with like a student representative and see if that's available at the school.
Yeah, a lot of the times when you get an interview, they'll provide you with like a listings and say, oh, use this code at this hotel and it gets you 20% off or something, let's say. But definitely don't be afraid to call in some favors, stay on some couches, do what you need to do to try to minimize the costs.
So I guess on the same subject, what advice would you give students who are, who are interviewing and again, maybe pre-COVID was a little different than right now, right? With the interviews being virtual, but as far as traveling, I always tell students you probably want to travel a day or two before so you kind of get an idea of where you're going and don't travel the day of because you probably start really early. So what advice would you give students about like, obviously cost is always an issue, right? But how many days would you suggest that they kind of get there? How do you think they should go about and, get the lay of the land, if you will, right? What advice would you give students in that respect?
Well, it is somewhere you might be living for the next 2 to 4 years. So you definitely, like I say, want to show up, I think at least a day early. I did show up a day or two early, if not, gave myself a full day, showed up the night before. So that way I was able to check out the area. I always rented a car, so I could always drive around, see areas, potential living areas. You really want to get, as much information as you can if you go to that area and end up moving. So highly recommend showing up. Also, you don't want to usually go the day of your interview because you're going to be tired, jet lagged, trying to panic, change. If you don't have a hotel, you're trying to change in the car into a suit, and it's just extra stress. If there's, flight delays, weather, Texas freezes over and everything flies through Texas. So that's always, you never can foresee everything. So as much wiggle room as you can make happen, recommend making happen.
I would also recommend, this did not happen to me, but it happened to one of my friends, is if you're flying, carry on your interview outfit with you, because his luggage got lost and he interviewed in a t-shirt and jeans, and that's not really how you want to do things. He actually ended up getting in, so he left an impression, but I would say carry on your interview outfit for sure.
Something they may not tell you, but on every plane, if you bring on like a suit, jacket, bag, they'll hang it up front for you if you just ask a flight attendant. Yeah, definitely have to do that a lot. So highly recommend, yes, carrying on the most important things with you.
Yeah, I definitely say don't fly out like right after the interview ends. This didn't happen to me, but some people came in to interview and they wanted to fly out at like 5 p.m. But if you don't know the city, maybe there's traffic at that time, and a couple people missed their flight. So they actually had to end up staying another night, which was more expensive if they would have planned to fly out maybe later in the evening or the next day. And then also sleep early, or try to sleep early the night before so you're well rested.
I'll also mimic that. Yeah, try to push out your flight as late as possible. I know a lot of people end up like leaving the interview time early. It's usually like a half a day, 3/4 of a day event where, you know, you get to tour the school, speak to students who are there, speak to faculty, and then there's like the interview. So a lot of times people had to like leave early to go catch a flight. And I mean, you're just kind of disservicing yourself. You're not seeing as much, you're not getting as much information, talking to people or seeing the area. So really just giving yourself more time for unofficial events.
I've got a question. Jasmine, I don't know if it sounds like you're the only one of our panelists who's been through a postbac program. And so I'm just wondering if we do have any students attending this session that are considering a postbac as a gap year activity. Is there, can you talk a little bit about your experience in the postbac program and whether you would recommend, you know, someone choose one, or pros and cons, those kinds of things?
Yeah, so the postbac program I did was the YE's program, and I kind of gave a spiel about it. But something that was great about this program, I was part of the first cohort, so it was fairly new. But through that program, I was able to gain residency in the state of Oregon. So I am like in-state tuition, so that's definitely a plus. Another plus is it's at the same school. All the classes were at the medical school already. So like I knew the building, I knew how to maneuver through the school, where a lot of my classmates, they're like, where's this at? And so that was again a plus. And then also, if your postbac program has a cohort that's gonna matriculate together, that's just a great support system. And you guys will go through the program together and really lean on each other. And we were able to take some courses with faculty. So we already kind of knew them. They would say hi to us in class. So it wasn't like we were never nervous or scared to go up and approach faculty. I think that was another great thing is if we had questions, we weren't scared and we asked them, and usually it wasn't beneficial just to us, but like everybody around us, which was also great. Cons, I really didn't see any cons. It was a great program. Also with this program, they helped with MCAT prep. And if you click on that link, they have their whole schedule there as well. Clinical shadowing, research. And it was kind of like an early decision program for that one. So if there's a similar program, that would be great. And I know this program just expanded and now it includes 3 schools: OHSU, Washington State, and UC Davis. I hope that answered the question.
And just to let you know that, you know, COM Tucson and Phoenix both have postbac programs. So there's the PMAP program in Tucson and the Hpsp program that's in Phoenix. In a later panel for today, there will be some PMAP, Hpsp people. So that's a question that could come up.
At my school, LECOM, Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine, they also do have a postbac program. A double-edged sword with that also, though, if you were to not do very well your first year in medical school and fail, as they call it, which you don't really think about what happens to you then, you go back, you admit yourself into the postbac program, assuming you want to continue and try again. So they'll put you kind of into the postbac program for this rest of the semester, second semester, and then you come in again as a first year medical student. But if you do the postbac program with them, which a lot of schools have, and then go to first year and don't do well, I don't know if they let you back into the postbac program as kind of a redo option. So a lot of schools do have the postbac, definitely recommend it for the same exact reasons. You could always tell the kids who came in from the postbac program, they were all friends, they all came together, they already knew all the professors, and oh yeah, Dr. England was super great, go to her for all your questions about this. So they really do have, a leg up on all the other first years. So definitely something to look into.
And I have a question. In terms of when you guys, or if you guys reapplied to the same schools or anything like that, did you ask for any feedback from the schools? And did you use your gap years to address the feedback if they suggested things?
I can talk about this. I did ask for feedback, especially after my first cycle, and U of A Tucson was the only one that would give me feedback on my interview or my application. A lot of the schools said, sorry, no, we don't do that. And it was kind of a, we have too many people, we can't really bother with you sort of deal. But to be honest, I don't exactly remember what the feedback was. So I assume I addressed it, but I was surprised that most schools wouldn't give me any feedback.
But I could assume it would only benefit you and make you look more professional if you definitely request feedback, especially in the week or two after, if you get a denial. Yeah, definitely ask. Worst comes to worst, yeah, they give you something to work on, self-reflect on. If you go to there for another interview, you could even bring that up. I think that would only benefit you.
So what type of support system did you have to get you through those, those, I guess, I hate to use the word rejection, but through those, those non-acceptance times, right? Well, what support did you have, and how important is to have that support even now, right? As students in your health profession. And this is for all of you.
Well, I actually had a little bit of a funny situation. So I have a close group of friends back home, and when I first applied, they were so excited for me. They decided that we were going to schedule a Vegas trip for when I got in. And I didn't actually end up getting in, but we kept the Vegas trip. And so it was my rejection Vegas trip because it was just a time to celebrate life and that, we get to try again and whatnot. So having people to support you is very key because it is an emotional roller coaster. It is a mental roller coaster. It's a financial roller coaster. And so just having people around you who support you and who keep you going, and especially now, like spending 24 hours a day alone in my apartment studying, I have to call people and talk to people because it's another roller coaster of emotions and stress and anxiety, and it's exhausting. So really keeping your group of people who are there for you I couldn't highly recommend that anymore. It's vital, I would say.
Yeah, as tough as it is to tell people that you didn't get in because you're doubting yourself more than ever, because you go in pretty confident, you did well in your undergrad, you did well with everything, you spend all this time, so much time and effort, doing your essays, going to the interviews, so much stress that it really takes an ego hit afterwards, as much as you're self-confident. But so definitely being able to share with those people, be comfortable, feel down about it for a little while. I'm trying to think of the exact timeline. I just got engaged or was going to get engaged. I had a girlfriend now and got engaged after I found out. But she was extremely supportive. Dogs, always extremely supportive. So I remember after I got my first full last denial letter of the season, okay, this is the last school I haven't heard back from, get the denial letter. I remember my now wife got me a Superman onesie, which was just hilarious, made me laugh, made me feel better. That was my favorite superhero at the time. So just they do things to kind of really help pull you through. So that's something I'll never forget. I found that in the closet the other day and I was like, well, I can't get rid of this because it meant a lot at the time.
So my experience was a little different. So I'll just talk about how homesick I got my first year here. I really leaned on my cohort. I called my mom and my sister a lot. And the only person I knew moving up here was my partner who moved with me. So he was great support all up until now. He's still great support. I also found people, the Native community here, who kind of became my surrogate aunties. So whenever I'm feeling homesick, I know I can always reach out to them and go see them. And then I also recommend getting a mentor who you trust. And then something else that I did while I was out here is I got a counselor, because medical school is very stressful, and it's just really great to have someone like a third party look into your life and help you process things. So I would recommend that. And it's great because it's free to all the medical students here at my school.
So there are a couple of questions in the chat, and the first one specifically for Cassandra about your research coordinator position, and they want to know if you could discuss it a little bit more.
Definitely. So I applied to, I actually applied to several research positions at U of A. And it was nice because once I graduated, I had a bachelor's degree. So you have a little bit more, you can apply to a little bit higher of a tier. And that was what the research, or that's what the university offered, was it was like a step up from a tech. So I had more responsibility and whatnot. I applied to 5 different positions, and the OBGYN department was the first one to contact me back. And I did an interview, got the position. So for that job, I ended up having a lot of independence because my boss at the time went on maternity leave about 2 months after I got the position. So I was kind of flying solo, but I was coordinating a clinical trial, and then there was probably 4 or 5 different research projects that were going on in the department. And it was really up to me to kind of plan my day and see what I was going to work on and whatnot. And then I became the go-to person for the department, and the residents all had to complete a project. And so I helped them with all their IRB, which is the paperwork that you have to submit for research studies. And it can be a big pain in the butt. And also now we have to do a research project in school here, and I have a lot of IRB experience. And so it's so nice to be able to just know how to fill out the forms and know what they're looking for. And I even have some IRB contacts that I talk to. But yeah, it was really fun. I got to do we did sample collections. So we were doing a study on cord blood. So I got to learn how to draw cord blood. We did a diabetes study. So I got to test A1Cs, and then just knowing all of the different people in the department was super fun, because I worked on labor and delivery. I worked in the clinic. So I got to know a lot of people, and honestly, it was an amazing job. And the pay was a lot better than I was getting paid for my tech job. So one other thing that was fantastic is when you work for the university, you get tuition reduction. So I started a master's program while I was working in that job. I started a master's in public health, and I got almost halfway through it. And so now in school, we have the opportunity to do a dual degree here, which would be an MD and an MPH. There are actually several options, but the one I'm doing is MD, MPH. And I'm almost halfway through it already coming in. So it's going to be, I'm going to graduate with 2 degrees, and it's going to be not as difficult as if I had to do the whole thing, but $25 a class of a graduate level class. It was really, I highly recommend it. University will take care of you.
And that's at all 3 state universities, FYI.
Yeah, it's great.
I know at U of A, they have the UBURP undergraduate biology research program, which if you can still get in on that, highly recommend it. I did that as well. So my senior year, I was able to get credit and get paid for any extra hours over like 20 or something than they paid me. Also, you build the relationships with the people on the floor, the other kind of professors that help teach at the medical schools and things like that. So that way, even during your gap year, they still might have some, even if you don't get paid, you can still help out in the lab, which is great volunteer. You're still work towards those letters of recommendation. So highly still recommend trying to get into a lab, do as much as you can, but accept as little as you can get. I loved what I was doing. I was in the Pareca neuropharmacology lab, and I kind of worked up to after I graduated. I was the kind of like main rodent surgical technician for that. So I got to do all the operations on the rodents, which I love to do because I got really good at suturing, scaffolding, things like that, to where now when I'm on the, an ER rotation and they just send the medical students to go, suture, really helpful to where it's like, I've luckily have the muscle memory of doing thousands of these. Meanwhile, I know some other medical students have never done a suture ever. and are in the bay next to me trying to do sutures, and you don't tell your attending if you don't know how to do it, but they will just send you to go do them unless you tell them, I don't know, please help me. So having that, confidence as well in whatever you do learn and are good at. So yeah, research is great. And also taught me that I do not want to go into research though. I loved what I did, but overall the bench work and the grants and applying and the writing, I do not want to do any of that.
Mine was opposite. It taught me that I did want to do that. So you never know what you're going to get.
I think we have a few more questions in the chat.
Yes, we do have a couple more. The next one after the specific one for Cassandra was, how did you approach finding jobs/experience per year? And did you tell your employers the approximate length of time you'd be working there?
So I actually worked during my postbac year. So I didn't really know anything about Portland when I moved out here, but I just went online to a couple of the Native organizations and I found an after school teaching program. So I did that for a year, which was way out of my comfort zone, teaching like kindergarten through like 5th grade. But it ended up being a lot of fun. And then it being after school, I was able to do my program, which was like half a day and then work. And then it actually ended around the time that my program was ending. So I didn't have to tell my employer and it just worked out.
I always told my employer during the interview that I wanted to go to medical school, which usually only reflects well on you because they know that you're usually pretty driven, relatively pretty smart, and that you work hard. So usually only works, in your favor as well. Also just let them know kind of roughly, as summarize as you can, a timeline. So, there's some interviews over, I may need a few days off in the winter time, but you'd have me at least until like June or something, let's say. So, you have me for a full year, you have me at least for this long. And both jobs as a PT tech and as a medical scribe were like really proud of the, like, oh yeah, we had previous med student applicants before, both of them got in. Like they love sharing that with you because they want to sell you that it's like good experience as well. So I thought it was only positive and definitely come forward with it. And both of them end up being letter writers for me. So you can let them know, it was a physical therapist and a doctor. So I'll let them know, give me feedback throughout, let me know, like, this is what I'm interested in. So anything you can cater towards my potential future would be great. And they can work that into a letter, which reflects well on you as well.
Yeah, that is a tricky line to walk, I think. And it depends on what job you're working with. Physical therapy and scribing, things like that, they kind of know you're here for a little bit of time. But other positions may want you for a longer amount of time. So I would always disclose that I could be gone in a year and kind of risk that, because otherwise you might, sour your relationship with that person. Most likely whoever's hiring you, you're going to work closely with, and they can be a good letter writer for you, like Eric said. So I would definitely disclose the potential, but tell them, I don't know if I'm getting in, so I could be here for 6 months or I could be here for 18 months, whatever. But yeah, I would definitely disclose it. And it's such a fluid time. You don't know what the next few months of your life are going to be like. So it is a challenge for sure. But yeah, a lot of places are pretty flexible with you, especially if they know you're applying to medical school.
There is one more question in the chat, and it is, if we don't have any people in mind for letters of recommendation, what do you suggest we do to seek out people for this in a gap year?
I do not like asking for anything. So that was extremely difficult. Like I said, I had both my bosses, essentially the physical therapist and the doctor, write letters for me. But definitely volunteering jobs as well. I volunteered at Tucson Medical Center while I was down at U of A in the cath lab. And that was really just like helping direct patient families while their loved one was in a cath procedure. Not doing much, but just some FaceTime. You still have people above you, making sure you show up on time, seem interested, being in the field, they'll still usually, they know it's a volunteer position you're working, they're usually working on a letter for you in general. So definitely have a few backups. Can't stress the backups part enough. Still had to ask for letters of recommendation for my residency right now. One of the doctors, when I was working with him, told me he would write a letter for me. After I left that rotation, never answered an email again. Just he was horrible with email and I can't get in contact with him. So definitely have some backup plans just in case timeline wise something happens. Always have ideally one more than they really ask for. And then you can choose the best ones when it's time.
I would say it's just going to depend on what you decide to do during your gap year, because almost anything you do is going to have some supervision. And as long as you're showing up on time, you're putting in good work, most people are willing to do that for you. I would also circle back to what Josie said. If there's somebody, a professor, or you work in a lab right now and they're meaningful to you and they will write you a letter of recommendation, and you want to keep in touch with them throughout the year, update them, say, hey, this is what I'm doing, because oftentimes I found they will be willing to write you a letter for the next year. But you do have to keep in touch with them, because otherwise it is kind of awkward and inappropriate to say, hey, I haven't seen you for a year, but can you write me a letter again? So I would really just every couple months say, hey, here's where I'm at. Just wanted to check in with you, maybe get coffee or whatever. I don't know if we still do that COVID wise, but yeah, that's what I say.
Really quickly too, how many letters of recommendation is ideal? Is it different for every school, or?
In my experience, it varies by school, and different schools typically want a little bit different. So if you have some schools that you really are interested in applying to, I would look up, they post whatever, they say what kinds of letters they want on their website. Majority of schools, I think I probably had 5 or 6 letters I would put most of my letters in. Some of them only let you have 3 letters. Some of them say you can, put up to 12 or whatnot, but make sure that you know what types of letters they're looking for and you have those things to fulfill the requirements. So I think you need one from like an educational advisor, one from a physician. Some schools, they ask for like a advisor panel letter. I didn't ever have to produce that, but yeah. So if you have some that you're really interested in and they're high priority for you, I definitely look that up. I always had about 5 or 6 letters and never ran into trouble with that.
So we suggest for those students that are applying is that because if you're applying to a variety of schools, and just like Cassie was saying, that each school asks for different letters, whether it's the AMCAS application or a COMAS, where you can also upload those letters, and you don't touch those letters, you don't handle those letters, they go directly from your letter writer up into the application. But typically we suggest 2 science professors, a non-science professor, your clinical letter, and the last one could be research, community involvement, could be your job. So that gives you a nice widespread. So 5 or 6 letters of recommendation. The application allows you to upload 10, but don't do it. Admissions committees hate that. So 5 or 6 at the most.
I guess one more note on that. I went to a DO school. A lot of DO schools will say you need a physician and usually at least 1 DO letter to show that you know kind of what the difference is, or you worked with somebody and kind of saw a difference. So mine, for instance, for that one, I was just shadowing a bariatric surgeon who let me into some of the surgeries. I went to clinic with them and saw those same clinic patients, asked a few questions, seemed interested, and that was my letter for that one. I didn't spend an exorbitant amount of time with him, but it was still, enough to just check that box kind of thing too, because there's still just some certain requirements. It wasn't one of my better letters, but for certain schools, I didn't have specifically that letter that they needed, so I went and got one.
And I think this is a good segue. I know that we're coming to our time, and just to respect everybody's time, if you need to leave or our panelists need to leave, we do have an hour in between. So if you did want to hang out and talk to any of the panelists, I know that Eric will be in a panel further. He was talking about DO school, And so we're actually later on going to have MD, DO, naturopathic, and doctor of podiatric medicine, so different areas of medicine. So that panel will happen later. The next panel will be on diversity, and Jasmine will be joining us on that. And we just really enjoy having everybody today. And all these are past ambassadors in our pre-health office. So we're really proud of them and really appreciate them taking the time today to come in and share their thoughts with you. So let the ambassador bring this to a close.
Okay, please thank all of our panelists for taking the time to be a part of our 2021 Virtual Health Professions Expo. And our next panel will begin at 3 p.m. and the topic is Health Professions Student Diversity Panel. And also our sponsor for this panel was FACES, as I believe Ethan mentioned in the beginning. And FACES is a pre-health club at the U of A, and I'm a part of the club, and we focus on health disparities, and we do a lot of volunteering in the community, and we have guest speakers. So if any of you are interested in that, I left our contact email there. You can just contact us and ask about the club or anything else like that.
Thank you.
Everybody. Thank you so much, Eric, Jasmine, Cassie. It's so good to see you. So glad that things are working well with you, but your stories are so compelling and students need to hear it, right? We could tell them till we're blue in the face. Hearing it from someone who's lived it, been there, done that. We really appreciate your time here. And our ambassadors that we have now are learning a great deal from a lot of things that you did before, like Eric actually started our first executive club council, and we're trying to rejuvenize that particular area in our ambassador program. And as you see, every one of you, participated in Expo, and, in this COVID society, we had to go virtual. So hopefully we did a good job to get information out, but thank you guys.
Thank you, Josie.
Good to
Thank
see
you all so
Thank
much.
you.
Great seeing you, Josie.
See you
Good
later.
luck, everyone.
Bye.